Welcome to Mindful Living with Neil, the podcast where we explore the world of mental health, spirituality, personal growth, and mindfulness. I am your host, Dr. Neil Shah, a psychiatrist and a mindfulness coach on a mission to transform the mental health of 1 million people on this planet using techniques from modern psychology and the timeless wisdom of ancient mindfulness. In each episode, we'll bring you practical tools, inspiring conversations, and insights from industry experts. So, whether you are someone looking for solutions to your mental health challenges, seeking spiritual growth, or have the desire to live a well balanced and holistic life, then this is the right place for you. So, let's begin this journey together towards a happier and healthier you, one mindful step at a time. Have you heard people around you saying that this person has a lot of ego? He thinks too much of himself. And most of the times, what people mean by this is that this person is very arrogant, he is very rude, he thinks only about himself, and he does not care about other people. But what if I tell you that modern psychological research has a completely new perspective on what the ego actually is? The ego is a very important part of our being, and it grows and develops as we grow and mature psychologically. Today, we have a very special guest who has dedicated her entire life to studying the ego. So I'm honored to welcome our guest today, Dr. Suzanne Cook-Greuter. Dr. Suzanne Cook-Greuter is recognized worldwide as a leading authority in ego development theory, the creator of the maturity assessment profile, as well as a seasoned coach, teacher, and cultural observer. Dr. Suzanne has a doctorate in psychology from Harvard University. Her widely read thesis, Post-Autonomous Ego Development, is regarded as a landmark study in the characteristics and assessment of highly developed, mature people. She is also the founding member and elder at Integral Institute, a fellow of Integral Africa, and a researcher at Inner Development Goals. As a trained linguist, Suzanne is fascinated by the variety of languages and views of reality other than her own Western conditioning. Since semi-retirement, Suzanne has focused on indigenous cosmologies and their relationship to nature. This includes an understanding of sustainability and human thriving not based on the separate self and linear, progressive ideas of development. Currently, Suzanne is working on an illustrative developmental fable, The Otter and the Owl. She finds great joy in drawing the characters. She is also finishing a book on ego development. Suzanne loves to draw, sing, cook, and bake. She is delighted to spend time with her extended family and her 5 young grandchildren nearby. So please join me in welcoming our guest today, Dr. Suzanne Cook-Greuter. So, hi, Dr. Suzanne. How are you doing today?
I'm just fine. I was looking forward to this conversation with you.
Wow, great, amazing. So, currently, where are you?
I'm in a town called Wayland, and if people have read some of American literature, there's a famous pond nearby called Walden Pond. And Thoreau was the author and actually one of what we call transcendentalists in this area. And it's in the woods, it's with animals, it's no fences. It's a great place to be at.
Wow, it sounds really interesting. Yeah. So, Suzanne, can we begin this podcast? I have some wonderful questions lined up for you. So, can we begin?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, Dr. Suzanne, can you share your journey of how you got interested in studying about ego and its development?
Sure. I grew up in Switzerland. I went to the University of Switzerland, studied linguistics, psychology, pathology, because it was free. We could study anything. You just had to pass the exams. But there wasn't, courses you had to take. As long as you could pass, that was all. And I was keenly interested in language, the meaning making, the process of different languages and how meaning has changed over time. And then I emigrated in 1976 to the United States to marry the husband that is still my husband after 46 years, and had children and all of that. And I realized my American degrees, advanced degree, didn't count here, so I had to go back to school. So I went to Harvard. I knew I could get in because just of who I was. And there, I said 79, I took a course in adult development theories. We looked at several, but when I met Loevinger's theory, I got really excited because their tool to assess how mature somebody is based entirely on language, on a sentence completion test. So, for instance, raising a family, and then the person writes what they think that is, or people who step out of line at work, or anything like that, education, crime and delinquency. And then you look at what they have written. And from that, you can actually deduce what stage of meaning they're making, how complex, how rich, how broadly embracing. Do they only care about their own family? Or is their heart open to all sentient beings? Who is my kin is the question. And you can see the whole range, it expands. That's why the title of the paper is Increasing Embrace. So that, and I got trained, and I very quickly got data that Loevinger's theory could not handle. And then I said, okay, I started to collect. It took me 15 years to get enough data to actually make some claims. And I was always an independent scholar, so I just did it because I was curious, because I really wanted to know. And eventually in 85, I first presented my view of it a bit different than Loevinger, with extra stages on top. And since then, I've been a coach teaching people how to use it. I have traveled the world to teach, which is wonderful. And the benefit, if you're an independent scholar, you don't have to teach students or grade papers or any of that. You can really just do what you want and travel where you want and explore what you want. That's a great blessing.
So, wow, Suzanne, that was absolutely an amazing journey of how you studied ego development. So, Suzanne, in our society, when people see a person who is very rude and arrogant, they tell that this person has a lot of ego, okay? But most people don't know what ego actually is based on modern psychological research. So, for people who don't know about it, can you please share in simple terms what is actually the ego?
It's that voice in you that always tells a story about what's going on. It doesn't matter whether you are in a hospital and see all those ants crawling under your skin. You will have a story. If the psychiatrist asks you what's happening, you'll have a story about it. The ego is the prime storyteller, always. And why does it do it? Because we all want to live forever or be permanent. We want to be important. It would be hard to live without those feelings. They're natural human inclinations. So that's what the ego is about, telling a good story about who I am and what the world is about, one that fits me, my capacity. And what we have found is, of course, that people have different story and they're systematically different. And that's what we then describe as adult development theories. Ego development theory has 9 levels, and each level is a new story about what's happening. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, Dr. Suzanne, like it was a
Don't tell me,
yeah.
just call me Suzanne, please.
Yeah, so Suzanne, it was a completely new perspective on ego. Like most people think it's just arrogance and rudeness, but you told that it's the voice inside us which creates a story for our life. So, like, that was absolutely fascinating. So, Suzanne, you mentioned that there are 9 levels of ego development. So, can you please share a brief overview of what these 9 levels are and what are their characteristics?
If we can now show that arc image, that would be helpful. Can you?
Sure.
So ego development theory, we understand to be like an arc, where in the first 4 stages, I'm only showing 8 here because the very early stages are for people who really can't lead adult lives. They're the ones who are in protective care in institutions very early, who are not developed. But then the first that we see is the self-centric. What happened there? And it is a stage that we know from sort of despots authoritarian people, people who only see what others for what they can give them, how they can be used. They have no real sense of responsibility towards others, no real sense of shame or any of that. They just do what they want. And amazingly we know many leaders, world leaders, who are making sense that way. And it's of great concern because really they can be very destructive, even as leaders in a business. But thank goodness the statistics show no more than like 5% are at this level in the sort of professional realm.
Mm-hmm.
Still, that's quite a few people when you think how many billion people we have. And what's happening in the first half is people develop a separate self-identity. More and more at the group-centric, they now actually can play in what we call the sandbox. The self-centric cannot. It will just take your bucket and your stuff and just do what they want. Here they learn how to cooperate, like we all do in grade school. You have to learn to wait your turn. You have to learn to, do all kinds of things together. Mm. What's missing in terms of ego development is a separate self. Your self is that of what your group, your Bible tells you, your religious document says, your priests and your parents say that is who you are. And anybody who is not like that, guess what? They're enemies. Mm. They're out to get us. You have to defend against them. You have to at least defend against them, if not destroy them, because they're a real challenge to who we are at the heart, at the bottom of things, not superficially. Mm-hmm. And of course, you also like to look like everybody else. You like to have the same things as your neighbors. That's all part of this level. But it's sensitive to others, which is really different than the stage before. And then there's a big shift from 3 to 3-4, because now we can actually, or at least what we say in ego development theory, that's when the separate self awakens. It becomes, you're starting to say, oh, I'm not like my parents. Mm-hmm. I don't like this anymore. I'm my own person. I'm special. And generally people learn something and then they're becoming good at it. And they identify with that. And we call that the expert or the skill-centric stage. Mostly expert in the business world. Mm-hmm. Somebody who is very good, often very good at something, could be making beds, could be in technology, could be anywhere, but they identify with that. So what do you think happens if you challenge them? They start defending. They mm-hmm. always have the last word. They always know better. And they don't like to be challenged because the challenge is not about a specific thing. It's about them. They feel challenged as a whole person. And of course, that is an issue when you are so personalize everything. And the next stage is the stage that in most Western countries is considered the adult stage. Mm-hmm. Now you have that independent self. You can, if you read it there, you notice more pieces of the puzzle. You can put them together. You know more and you can do more. You can predict, measure, and explain. So it's also the general basic scientific model of understanding reality. You can look at patterns. You can create theories about all sorts of things because you can see or you think you can see the patterns. And you start to look ahead. Planning is a big thing in this thing, creating goals and reaching goals. And you can look back and also understand yourself a bit in terms of, I was like that when I was in my 20s, but now I look at life this way. I have changed. Before, change is not really part of a person's awareness. And it's a powerful stage. We have so much of modern world, including prescribing meds, can come from this place because it was created from this mindset, the scientific mindset, testing, experimenting, looking at data, making conclusions. All of that is really well developed here. And the sense of power, a sense of self that is separate. I'm the master of my destiny would be something a person might write at this level. Who are you? I'm the real sense of separate self. And of course, that's from other perspectives, a total illusion. For one, no human being would even survive if not others cared for it when it was a newborn, a baby. And all along, there's so many other influences of why we prosper or don't, why we get ill, how we get help. All of this has nothing to do with my sense of what I have accomplished. And the shift, and that's a huge shift from the first part to the second, is becoming aware of the context that influences who I am. And if you look at the numbers there, 80 to 85% are conventional, what we call conventional meaning makers. And only a small part is post-conventional, and it gets fewer and fewer as we move across the stages. So the stage 4, 5 is the first that realizes the context, that realizes that other people have their own stories and that mine is just a story that I'm telling because all the things that have brought me to where I am. And now I realize that and respect other people's stories. I say, oh yes, of course, they make different sense than I do, but theirs is as valid as mine. I can't say you're wrong. And in businesses, you get the problem of consensus is very important. We're all agreeing that we're disagreeing. And of course, that also leads to kind of paralysis, because if everybody's story is equally valid, then who can make a decision for a group? You can't step back and say, well, this is a good argument and this isn't, because that would mean I'm taking myself as more than the rest. So it is a very interesting place to be, and yet often that's exactly where we see the movement happening between 4 and 4, 5. People middle-aged or a little later say, I've been part of this rat race. I've gone after achievement and achievement, but so what? Isn't there anything else? Perhaps they have joined a yoga class, or perhaps they take some mindfulness exercises, or partake in a religious context that offers something else, that says there's more than that to life, than the rat race, than achieving whatever. And so they're starting to explore further. They also, at this level, people start to look at their dreams. They look at their fantasizing, daydreaming. All of it is the information about life, not just rationally, objectively what you can see outside. So the shift is also from merely objective to objective and subjective. That's a big shift. And also that, of course, means from outside to inside. Not that earlier stages also can't have, sense of insight, but here it becomes very important to make that distinction and to explore, starting to explore what's inside. I don't no longer need to predict, because the here and now is more interesting than whatever in the future. And if we work with people in business who just made that stage, they sometimes reject everything that went before. And then you have to reintroduce them that it's both, and you need both some skills, you need some goal-centric things you have to do in life, or you can't support yourself. And you can also develop all the other parts of you that so far have been neglected. And the next stage, what we call self-actualizing, is the one which now realizes that they themselves have come through all those stages. They're still there. I can still react really angry at somebody, or I can, in an argument, I can really try to win it. I know better than you. The difference is now I'm aware that I'm doing that. And I can hold back, or I can, I can self-manage that. Not that we don't still do it. It's just that I have ways to be aware of it. So what also increases is awareness. the person has more and more awareness of their inner life and their patterns of behavior, and the good ones and the bad ones. So if they discover something like that, they're also most likely to seek help and say, oh, I need a third person. I need a perspective on me that I can create by myself. People at this level have a much broader embrace. They look at historical precedent. They're concerned about the future generations, not just about immediate context, but further out in all ways. And they can relate to me more people because they know I've been a self-determining person at some point. I know at times I may even act group-centrically. When I go home for Christmas, and my family is very conservative and very clear in their beliefs, I behave. I don't rattle the cage. It's kind to then just keep your own ideas to yourself. So I behave group-centrically, but in my consciousness, I'm not group-centric. That's a choice, a behavioral choice I have. At the later stages, I have way more choice in how I want to behave. I may even have to be reacting very, very strongly to a self-centric person. And when I really put my fist down and say, no, no further, this is not okay, and deal out punishment or whatever is necessary. Before people are afraid of that because they can't move around yet. From here we can. And then the next level is really the hardest and the fewest people get there. It's becoming aware of that we all tell stories, that even developmental theories are wonderful stories. Science is a story. The famous E.O. Wilson once said, and I loved it when he said it was, science is the greatest myth of them all. Becoming aware of that does not diminish the power of these things. It doesn't throw them out. It just says, have some perspective on it. Not everything. And that's, at the moment, sort of my task in my field of adult development is to point out, there are other cosmologies than the Western one, the weird one. There are other, and that has equal value. We just don't understand it yet enough. But to say this primitive is just truly, truly morally wrong. At the construct aware stage, you also can be quite vulnerable because I used to get clients who were at this level and they came and said, what shall I do? Nobody understands me. I'm confused. Am I just, inventing everything? Or is there really something to being at this way of being where everything is ambivalent? There's no truth you can find. Because as soon as you find what you think is a truth, you have to deconstruct it. You have to take it apart and say, hey, no, there is this other thing that influences it. So you're kind of in limbo. At stage 4, 5, you still believe there is a truth. It's just a complex thing that we can figure out. Here you say, it seems like it's moving with every day, with every breath. Reality is changing. And what we also see is that the later the stage, the more likely you have moments when you watch your own thinking, where you transcend, where you're suddenly in a different place, in a different state. And so you start to be more and more interested in those other states because they seem to give you some hold that was missing at this level. This kind of total relativistic place is hard to be in. I'm both how shall we say it? I'm both a nothing compared to the universe, and I'm a universe compared to nothingness. That insight, and to live in that tension, that is not easy. But people manage at some point. I know people who have lived there for a long time. That's okay too. But sometimes they also then transcend that place. And what it does in ego development theory, at least, it becomes kindly towards the fact that ego can do no other. It has to tell a story. That's its function. So I say, okay, be quiet. Don't bark every time something comes up. I know you're doing this because you want me to feel permanent and important, but it is not the truth. It's not the reality. In reality, everything is in flux. Every moment I perceive so many influences to all my senses. It is not stable. It's not a thing that I can describe. Even myself, I'm in flux as well. And we call that unitive. And in terms of theory, I did not have data, and I don't think other people don't have it either. That would give us the data to make the distinctions. And for that one would need, I told you, it took me 15 years to get enough data to come here. I don't know where you would get the data to. Of course, there are Eastern traditions, Vedantic, and they're top down. They start out with the undifferentiated, the unity consciousness, and then it's a particularization downwards toward the concrete. And Western developmental theories are bottom up. But to confuse the two, to me, one has to be very careful not to do that. And to just adopt some of the Eastern ideas and, put them on top of ego development. Anyway, that's the short of it. It is a movement from very simple being to quite wise and perceptive and tolerant and all-embracing. And if you want to, you can draw it as I call the cosmic egg. There's the evolution and there is the involution back to the beginning.
Wow. Yeah. So, Suzanne, that was absolutely fascinating and enlightening, the model which you shared. And as you were describing the stages, I could see myself in those stages. Like when I look back at my life, I could realize that I was at this stage at this particular time and I had these specific thoughts, but I did not realize that I was at this particular stage. So, like, this model is absolutely amazing and fascinating. So, Suzanne, I am a psychiatrist by profession. So, I deal with many patients suffering from depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. So, how can understanding ego development theory help patients in dealing with their anxiety, depression, or other mental health issues? Or how can psychiatrists or other psychotherapists or practitioners use this theory to deliver treatment to their patients?
I think that's the better question, because I don't think it's helpful to most patients, unless they're already post-conventional, and asking those kinds of questions about what does it mean and all of that. I don't think it's helpful to even share a theory with them like that.
Okay.
However, it would be very good if psychiatrists and therapists, people in the helping profession, coaches too, actually are familiar with enough with these kinds of theories so they can realize where a client might be in this procession. So they can tailor it, make the best choices, what kind of methods, what kind of therapies would be ideal for that person.
Yeah. So that was absolutely fascinating, Suzanne, because like in many professions or many coaches, they have a one size fits all. Like
That's
for every
generally stage.
person,
That's expert.
mm,
Experts have one
mm,
size. They know what's best, period.
yeah.
They don't adjust it to the client.
Mm-hmm.
And achievers, of course.
Mm-hmm. But according to your model, if we recognize a person's stage, we can tailor particular treatment for that stage. And it would be
Yes.
really helpful for
More
that client.
likely, you would be more sensitive to what would work for that person and what might be over their head or the wrong thing. I once had a therapist who wanted to do cognitive, what's it called, rational therapy with me. Imagine that. That wasn't a very good match.
Mhm.
Very quickly said, of course I can watch my thoughts, and of course I can direct them any which way I want, or even just let them float away and not grab them.
Mhm.
That wasn't helpful. So then you can really tailor,
Mhm.
adjust what you do to the person you're dealing with.
Mhm. Wow, great, great, Suzanne. That was absolutely amazing. So, Suzanne, how can ego development theory or understanding the ego help people in their day-to-day lives, like in their work, in their relationships, or their career? How can they use it?
Well, if again, it depends how much they understand already. First, generally, people around stage 3, 4, 4 get interested in how others are different. They
Mhm.
might take a test like the MBTI, or there's a whole bunch of tests that kind of give you a static image. You are this type,
Mhm.
and then you know that others are other types, and that might help you actually, not ego development, just knowing about the characteristics of other people you work with or at home in your family might actually help you, rather than getting upset. You're meticulous and want everything to be like that, but your wife,
Mhm.
is much more freewheeling. Knowing that makes you less upset about her being different, more able to say, yeah, isn't that interesting? We're such different characters and we still love each other. So, in that sense, it can help just being aware of other people.
Mhm.
Later, it can help to you actually deliberately wanting to develop
Mhm.
and seeking out courses, seeking out trainings that will say that they will transform the way you look at life.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So that was absolutely great, Suzanne, again, like how we can use it in our daily life. So, Suzanne, most of my audience is interested in mindfulness, spirituality, and meditation. Okay. So, how can ego development theory complement a person's meditation or mindfulness practice? Can it be used in their mindfulness practice?
Yes, in terms of awareness, again, if you're more aware of what's going on inside,
Mhm.
the more perspective you have on that, and that
Mhm.
can get enhanced with mindfulness training.
Mhm.
Mindful means being aware of the mind. In that sense, it's supportive.
Mhm.
And they're, of course, also dangerous, particularly in terms of ego development. But starting with stage 3, 4, and 4, people want to achieve enlightenment. And
Mhm.
it just becomes another achievement goal. When, of course, I would say that is not, it's a grace. It's not something you can achieve.
Mhm.
So you can learn to be more compassionate. You
Mhm.
can be more wise. You can defer, judgment. So you don't so quickly judge something else. You look at it first. All of these are useful. But
Mhm.
to me, there is always that desire, particularly of Westerners, to get higher, whatever it is. And that's part of why all the other developmental theories are onward and upward. They're
Yeah.
spirals, they're
Mhm.
stacked, they're
Mhm.
whatever. That's why we don't show it that way.
Mhm.
So first you build a self, a separate self, then you can slowly, stepwise, get rid of the boundaries till there are no more boundaries and no more illusion of
Mhm.
what a big shot you are.
Mhm. Okay.
So,
Yeah. So that was absolutely great, Suzanne. So, Suzanne, I know from your work that you work with many leaders, like in businesses and organizations.
yes.
So, can you share a story of your client about how ego development theory helped the client and their organization?
I've been working and I've just stopped because I'm now really retiring with a company for 13 years, and it's called a deliberately developmental company, a
Hmm.
DCC. And there is some literature out there about that. That means the company structure is built so that people within it can grow. It's not just one bottom line money. How do we make more and more money? But
Hmm.
how do we help people grow within the context of the company? And it
Mhm.
really probably has to come from above. In this case, the leadership team, of course, got tested. So we had an idea, different coaches who worked with them, again, how to tailor optimally to where they were at.
Mhm.
In that sense, yes. But in most cases, business is not towards helping its staff grow and having a working place where people want to come.
Mhm.
All the statistics show that the few places that are that way have far less recidivism. People do not take extra sick days because they just can't stand to go to the office. They're actually glad to go to work and be with their colleagues.
Mhm.
That's what we see, but it's rare. It's
Mhm.
still rare,
Yeah.
that kind of company.
Wow. So that was great, Suzanne. The work that you are doing, even if those companies are less, but still they are trying and thinking about the growth and development of their employees. So that
That
is
would be
absolutely.
ideal.
Mhm.
More so, more less just a bottom line, one
Mhm.
bottom line company.
Yeah.
And again, the leaders are influential.
Mhm.
What also happens, and that's the sad story, I've had it now happen in two companies.
Mhm.
There is a period in which they're really built that way for the benefit of all, the well-being of the people who work. And then there's a shift in leadership, and then everything just goes away.
Mhm.
Suddenly it's bottom line, all that again. But it is possible.
Yeah, great. So, Suzanne, for people who are interested in your work and who want to go deeper into your work, what resources would you share with them? Like if they want to dive deeper into this work of ego
Well, the
development.
9 levels paper, I say, would be good.
Mhm.
When the book, the fable is out,
Okay.
it's actually written for lay people. It
Mhm.
uses animals instead of people,
Wow.
representing all the different stages.
Mhm.
The owl, the water is the final stage, the unitive,
Mhm.
because we come out of water, we are made out of water. It's an element that embraces whatever is in it, receives everything.
Mhm.
That would be a recommendation. Maybe when it's done, when it's published, I'll let you know.
Mhm. Wow. I am really looking forward to that book and reading it because like it will simplify the ego development concept and even the lay people can understand it. Yeah, great,
Yes,
great,
even
Susan.
children 12 on all at least to some degree at some point, people, as soon as stage theories are above somebody's head, they
Mhm.
just can't imagine to be like that, then they stop reading.
Mhm.
That's also just
Mhm.
fine.
Great. So, Suzanne, what final advice would you have for our audience about the conversation which we had? Like, what final piece of advice would you like to give them?
Always think of the other as a love, in terms of love, in terms
Mhm.
of care, in terms of embrace. It's tough. It's very tough to be an adult. It doesn't matter where you make meaning and what you believe. It is tough. So show some care for others and for yourself as well if
Mhm.
you find it difficult. Give yourself a hug.
Wow.
Appreciate your body. It has carried you to the day, to now, to this very day. It
Mhm.
has been there as a vessel for you to
Mhm.
operate in this world.
Yeah. So, like Suzanne, that was a beautiful advice because I see many patients and they are very intelligent, they are successful in their careers, but they don't love themselves, they don't like themselves, or they cannot accept other people as they are. And I think that is the most important thing for living a happy and fulfilled life, like
I would,
your relation with yourself and how you relate with others. So, that
yes.
was a beautiful advice, Suzanne. Great.
Okay.
So, Suzanne, this was a wonderful podcast, and like we had an amazing conversation. And I'm sure that our audience enjoyed it and they will implement whatever they have learned in this podcast in their life. So, thank you, Dr. Suzanne. And I look forward to having you again on our podcast with more such interesting topics. So, thank you so much, Dr. Suzanne.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Happy holidays. We're getting into cooking and making all that
Great.
Christmas stuff.
Yeah. Happy Christmas to you. Great.
To
Yeah.
you, whatever you celebrate. Yes.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Dr. Suzanne. Yeah. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Mindful Living with Neil. I'm sure that the insights and information shared by our guest, Dr. Suzanne Cook-Greuter, have sparked new ideas in you and gave you a completely new perspective on what the ego actually is and how you can use the ego development theory in your day-to-day life. Do like, comment, and ask your questions below. We'd love to address them in future episodes. If you like this episode, share it with your friends, family members, and relatives who might benefit from it. I'll see you on the next episode of Mindful Living with Neil with more such inspiring guests and inspiring conversations. Until then, stay mindful, stay happy, and remember that all rudeness and arrogance is not ego.